guess tribe is the word that comes to me when I think back then. I think that we were all seeking a different kind of lifestyle.
We really thought we were going to change the world. We really, really thought we were going to change the world.
I mean, we didn't call ourselves hippies, it was the locals that called us hippies.
Or we called ourselves freaks, which is really, you know, that's what we were. There were freaks and straights.
And men with long hair. For goodness sake, how shocking.
It was very difficult to get a job. You get hassled in the street. Didn't so much in Hebden Bridge.
To have people moving in and living in a way that none of us quite understood was just, I suppose, exciting.
It took a lot of time for people to accept us. We were just from another planet.
And I think us moving here was fundamental to the way the town developed in the last 30 or 40 years.
I was born in 1946 and we lived at Hythen Road in one of the large shops opposite the St Michael's Church. It is now JMD Hardwares. Hebden Bridge was called Trouser Town because there were so many factories, but they only made the trousers. If you went through Hythen Road and Hebden Bridge at lunchtime, well, you know, it was like a hive of activity. There were hundreds of people being let out of all these factories with an hour's time, and that was it. And it was so, you know, they're so busy, so busy. And all these people out on the streets.
What sort of decade was that, or what years were that you remember it being very, very thriving, very, very busy?
Up to the 60s, the middle 60s. And then it started to go downhill. And once one mill, I mean, a lot of them had fires because that was the best way of doing it, because they got an awful lot of insurance. You know, and the insurance, and I mean, it was like a domino effect, you know. But once they did start going down, then they went down, and it went down very quickly. And an awful lot of people then moved from the area. So we were like a ghost town, nothing much going on, and that, you know, there was just so many people and no jobs. Anyway, then the hippies moved in, which was good and bad.
Nowadays, I'm attending Wayne's Gate Chapel. I've been there for 13 years as organist. When I attended it first, we used to have a congregation of 50 to 60. Now we're getting down to about 20. And it simply means that every time one of the old members of the church or the congregation passes on, there doesn't seem to be any younger people to take the place.
I think Hebden Bridge was very different then. You've got to remember that it's been stone cleaned. Then it was sooted. It was post-industrial. So you had all the buildings in the middle of Hebden, all Hebden, the buildings were black. And I suppose the hippies came, that wave of hippies that I was part of, came and brought a sort of new life to the town in a way. Young people. We were in our late teens, early 20s. You know, we were very young and with all new ideas.
That was part of the appeal of the place, was actually it was half empty. So that, in a way, was an invitation to create something new in itself, you know. And it was easy to find places to live, really cheap rent, or squats. People were squatting here when I came.
All these houses that were going so cheaply, it's because they were empty. There was no one living in them. And I used to see an old guy walking around the tops, and I was chatting to him, and he said, "Do you know, looking down on Hebden Bridge from up top somewhere," he says, "at one time you could only see this at the end of Wakes Week, the end of the holidays, because they closed the factories down, everybody would go on holiday, and the smog would clear, and you'd see the valley bottom. Because before that, it was just full of smoke. Yeah, dark satanic mills."
When I first came here in 1975 to move, I'd already visited a few times. Half the town was boarded up. They were knocking houses down because no one wanted to live in them. And so it became the ideal point for people who hadn't got any money but had got lots of ideas to move to.
We were wanting to get away from our parents and their lifestyle and what that post-war sort of generation were. You know, that, I guess, I think freedom is the word that comes to me, actually.
They brought dramatics and arts and crafts and that kind of thing. But they also got, you know, we got so many more ideas because they were coming in with, you know, what they did in the area they came from and stuff. So it was a completely different town. But really, you know, we were so desperate for these people.
There certainly are a number of old people in Hebden Bridge. Virile old people, very, very active. The reason is the youth of today, they're after better jobs and going further afield for their occupation, which is leaving a large proportion of elderly people compared with the younger generation.
So we were very, you know, unconventional in our dress and our, you know, different food, different clothes, just seeking a different expression with more freedom.
And I cut the pattern from a Palestinian dress. We were all wearing Palestinian dresses. Well, not all of us, but a lot of us. I had a beautiful Palestinian dress which I felt apart, so I cut it, made a pattern, and this is my dress, made of scraps of velvet.
Being a single parent father, now that was different in those days. Some people, you know, they couldn't cope with it, you know. And, then I didn't have an income, so I did have to sign on. But I didn't like that. I didn't like relying on the system. I was quite anti-establishment. You know, I didn't like that, any of that. We fitted in. We bought from the local shops. You know, there used to be an old furniture place called Harrison's on West End, and we all got our furniture from there. But it was all like your old enamel bread bins, and you know, lovely flowered, plates and dishes. You know, the old sort of. The only thing was, it was missing a Whole Food shop. So I opened up a bank account and registered the business, and I called it Aurora Foods. And I started getting bulk Whole Foods. And we had on the 8th day in Manchester, Whole Food shop, which was really well known. That was a cooperative.
That's the view. And that's why he's dressed up like that. He wouldn't be. My mum bought that. I wouldn't have had that. This is how he was when Mum didn't paid for me to have my kitchen tiled. The idea came to us to set up a Whole Food shop in Manchester, and we opened it in September 1970. It was called On the 8th Day, and it became a real hub for sort of alternative community.
So we got the bulk stuff in. People would come in and help bag the food up, put it on the shelves, or people brought in their own bags and jars and filled up. So you had a big pot of peanut butter, honey, barmine, the old yeast extract. If it was a bigger jar, help yourself and just weigh it and then pay. and it was affordable because it was bought in bulk. And I took very little, you know. We had a rent to pay, and I did. And then you see, I started getting a little bit of a wage, so I was able to kick the dole, which I didn't like, but to be independent. It's great. So it was good for self-esteem. It's good, you know. I felt better about myself.
Because on the eighth day was such a magnet for the alternative folk. People would come out with us who were either working there or visiting there, where they would come out here, and then they'd look for places. Eventually, we got a works van, and we were driving in and out with a van full of people every day to Manchester. And Mike and I were also making clothes in the barn here. Because it's traditionally, you know, a weaving and trouser place, Hebden Bridge. And there were a lot of women out of work, and we bought one of these cutting machines from one of the old mills, and we made a cutting table, and we made loads of these Moroccan style capes that were all the rage, based on what people brought back from the hippie trail when they went to Morocco. There were these capes, so they were a really good seller, and they just walked off the shelves. And so that's how we managed to do the house up, selling Moroccan capes.
And you could buy a ruin, you know, sort of a dwelling that needed a lot of doing up, you know, for something like 200, 300 quid, which sounds ridiculous now.
So I moved into an underdwelling. I met this couple who had a house on Chapel Avenue up Birchcliff, and they had an underdwelling on Edward Street. And the guy who'd lived in it before me and my girlfriend had lived in there with his horse. So when we took over, it was just full of straw and horse shit. So we had to dig it out and clean the place, you know.
And then there was the scene in Hebden itself, where there was a number of hippie people who had moved to the Queen's Terrace.
They wanted to knock Queen's Terrace down, and so we were squatting it. We were all separate in some ways. We all had our separate little unit, but at the same time, there was a kind of collectivity as well.
And every house had a hole through the wall, so people could just walk back and forth. I think the interesting story was, you know, because a number of people lived there, and when Social Security came round, you know, they used to hop through the hole and close it up. You know, so all right, we live here. You know, they're claiming from it.
We had great plans for it as well. We wanted to develop it in our way, and we had support from some councillors, but it was around the time when the swing was going back towards the Tories, and the Tories took control of Calderdale, and you know, after that there was not really any chance. We went to the various council meetings, made our case, but they evicted us. But the one victory that we did have is that they didn't pull the houses down, so they're still there housing people.
I'm Nick Wilding, and I came up in 1974 because we'd seen that there was a cottage in Slack Bottom. I didn't realise it was called Slack Bottom when I went. Because it said converted coach house, it said, in Heptonstall Slack, in the Manchester Evening News, and we never thought for a minute we'd end up buying it. We sort of came up sort of thinking, oh well, it would be really interesting to see that. In fact, there had been a coach house at some point, but it turned into two cottages, and yeah, we had all sorts of things to do to it at that time, and so consequently we probably got a bit mucky really doing all this stuff like that, and we thought, well, why don't we go to our closest local pub? And that would happen to be the White Lion in Heptonstall. So we went off to the White Lion, and I went up to the bar, and he told me to leave. He said, and I can understand why, you know, what I'd done exactly, but apparently they'd just had some hippies in just before. and it just thought, you know, because I mean, people around here, if you had hair slightly longer than the short back and sides and slightly over the top of your collar, you were basically a hippie, whether you liked it or not. So basically, we ended up going out. I don't think my wife has ever gone into the White Line since. She was so upset.
Some local people were very welcoming and very friendly and very helpful, and others were suspicious and judgmental. There were lots of antagonistic letters in of outroar in the Hebden Bridge Times. Didn't like houses being squatted. And
this sort of this squatting move into the properties. My dad in particular, who ran a business in Hebden Bridge, he was really offended by this, and I know that he took it upon himself to start monitoring properties in his patch, and I think there was something about if somebody was in a property for, I don't know, 72 hours or something, they could claim squatters' rights. So my dad used to monitor all the padlocks in his little beat to make sure that they were safe. And if somebody tried to get the better of him, then he was like really upset about it.
So yeah, there was antagonism, and there were unfortunate incidents outside pubs. Young hippie guys getting beaten up because they had long hair or bare feet, or there was aggression towards hippies for certain. I think there were a few shops that said no hippies served here at one time.
Then again, from my mum, she was telling me about a house that I was born in was squatted, and the front door was carved and written on, and she said it was my front door, and she found it really upsetting.
I came back one day and the curtains were drawn in my house. I thought, oh my God. So I went inside, and the whole living room was ransacked, and the cash tin was open. Someone had bloody broke in and stole the money. I thought, oh no, what about the shop? Oh my God. So I got the police round. I mean, didn't like getting the police round. I didn't have a high opinion of the police then. So they came round, they fingerprinted, they dusted everywhere, I said, and the copper said, it'd be that family round the back. Because there was like a balcony around the back to backs. And there was a local family lived there who were quite notorious to the police. It'd be there, but he's probably climbed up and through your attic window, because the attic window had left open, but there was no sign of breakage through the front door. So I went round and confronted them. Have you got my money, Well, they didn't like that. So, basically F off, We didn't know what you're on about, accusing us,
When I was at university in Birmingham, I got sort of involved with various people who wanted to do all sorts of druggy things. I wasn't one of those really, but I sort of tried to join in. And so they were making a bit of a film. It's probably been in a skip for about 60 years now, I suspect. but they were making one, and they said, well, I know they said to me, Nick, do you want to go on a trip? And I said, oh, sounds very nice. Where are we going? And they said, oh, Nick. They said, they thought I was joking. Well, actually, it just doesn't occur to me.
One of the barriers that prevented us from socialising more with local people was the drug culture. And we, to a person, everybody smoked dope.
They brought the drugs. We never had a drugs problem. And I mean, I'm saying that they did. Well, yes, they did. But it was... drugs was not a problem in any area, I don't think, much before the 60s, But then the hippies came and they brought that, and that changed it, you know, very much so. And I mean, that's still around, even worse today.
And one of my friends went to Afghanistan and brought some back, and he got busted. He lived up at Foster Clough.
Down
Foster Clough Road there, where they all live.
Descended. So that little joining bit, that was just a little steps down to the front. But now there's still is steps down
where
underneath
that
it.
Extension where that's where Graham's little garden was.
Only time we really knew of drugs is when we had a police swarmed one morning. They landed just before I went to school, it was about 8 o'clock one morning. And so then we didn't go to school, we were watching. And they had cannabis in the chassis of a VW, and they thought it were all buried in the garden there, but I don't think they actually found them there. But actually Graham did go to jail for 2 or 3 years.
We were very paranoid about it, and, you know, very careful. But it obviously you couldn't. You could only. It was great when you got all your hippies together, or your freaks, or your heads, whatever we want to call it. You know, we were on our own wavelength. But it didn't involve. There was a big separation between those people that didn't smoke dope and weren't part of the culture.
And then the hippies came, so we used to play down there with them on the scale electrics. They used to take us out to various festivals and bits of things, whatever were going on. I can't remember where they took us, whether it were local. I don't think it was too far away. But we was always down there, and they were all helpful and good.
I suppose I've always seen the craziness of mainstream society. It's never made any sense. Didn't when I was a kid, didn't when I was growing up as a teenager. And then I started to find my tribe, you know. And my tribe, unfortunately, were illegals in terms of what we chose to smoke or not smoke, you know.
So I'm just trying to find... That was our house in Windsor Road. Yeah, my mum was like totally snap happy when we were kids. Oh yeah, licking icicles down Salem. That's some of the other kids that I grew up with on Windsor Road. Yeah, it was just, I mean, we didn't have anything, but we had each other. I think you were judged for where you lived. So, you know, if you grew up on Hippie Street in Windsor Road, people were like, oh, well, they'll just smoke weed and take loads of drugs and neglect their kids. And, you know, it was, you kind of had that barrier there when you met someone. So friends at school, not many of them would come for tea, for example, or one or two of them might, but I think the parents were a bit kind of like...
I remember my daughter running up from school, bringing a straight friend, home, and running up here to check that Mike wasn't smoking, so that the straight friend wouldn't smell it, wouldn't suspect. So it was a big thing because we told the kids what we were doing, but they weren't supposed to say, you know. And so that was, I think, a pressure on them. So, and it may not have been a good thing.
So my parents were different in that, for example, my mum, when the war was on in Bosnia, she and some other women drove like 7.5 tonne lorries out there with aid. And then when she came back, she would come to school and pick me up in a 7.5 tonne lorry. You know, so I'm like mortified, but my mates are like, oh, that's so cool. And things like, you know, they'd come home with my mates from a night out. We'd go drink beer under the doctors in Hebden when we were about 15, 16, and then stagger in pretending to be really sober. But mum and dad were having like a party of their own with the neighbours in the living room, you know, candles and bit of left field going on, and oh yeah, don't worry, you know, come on in. Do you want to come and sit with us? No, I don't. And my mates were like, let's go sit with your parents. No, we can't. And then my mum did all my haircuts when I was a kid. Mum cut my hair off and she just big scissors.
Would you call it racism against hippies? could it be called racism? Because we were a different species, but we were wanting to be, and the kids wanted to be, to fit in, obviously, but they looked a bit different. And they were a bit feral because everything was just so. That's another thing about straights. Everything's just so, in terms of houses and everything, whereas we were scruffy because wasn't really important to us, and we'd live, that way. And so the kids, we bought their clothes in jumble sales and cut their hair for them if they cut their hair at all. But eventually, kids being kids wanting to fit in, they eventually conformed, and things improved quite rapidly.
When I was 17 or thereabouts, it was the summer of love, wasn't it? And there we were, at that age. So I did get excited by the fashions. And then, in order for this little bit of a film they were making, I was going to be sort of dancing in psychedelic lights and things. So I'm not a good dancer. But it doesn't matter if you're completely covered in blue and gold caftan.
Seems to me that the nation is caught up in a spirit of indifference and involvement in physical and material pursuits, which makes it careless of moral and spiritual things.
And I know a lot of locals and people that I know from school say, "Oh, I'm never going to Hebden Bridge." They sort of have this big. It's not the town. It's not our town anymore. But I think, well, what would you rather have? Would you rather have this really unique space with really fantastically unique shops that I think must have been influenced by the hippies coming in and bringing all that excitement and creativity and different skills and different ideas? Would you rather have that town or the town that we had when we were teenagers?
It's different down in Hebden now than when we were younger, because everybody's come from far away. It's very mixed down there now. It is full down there. We go down there now and you never see any locals really.
I suppose every now and then, if I sort of talking to my old hippie tribe friends, we might kind of go, well, it's not the same. It's not like it used to be in the old days, It's inevitable, isn't it? I think a lot of the things that attracted us are no longer here, Well, the quiet, actually. We really liked the peace and quiet because it was half empty. So the peace and quiet's gone,
Okay, you can get all uppity about the tourists and things, and the commercialism and what have you, but it's still a lovely place to be and a lovely place to live. And it's like my family now, it's like my tribe. I know so many wonderful people.
You see, the kids of the straight people have all become, a lot of them have become hippies, haven't they? And certainly Molly's friends have all become, so there's a lot less differentiation now between them. And even those people that were never on our wavelength, I'm friendly with now, so that those bridges have been crossed, which is good.
But I meet so many young people who are just amazing and very open, and they're fantastic. Some of them like kids, and they astound you. They're so well spiritually developed, and that gives me a lot of hope.
I think I'm from a generation of people who just wanted a more relaxed lifestyle and to come away from kind of all the stresses of the rat race, kind of like buy this, do this, have this, be this. And it was like, no, you know what, kids? You want to run around naked at 5, 6, 7 and, build bonfires and don't brush your hair and, make your own decisions. Your own direction rather than kind of doing what everyone else is doing what feels right for you. So I'd say that's kind of what a hippie is. Yeah.
olvidarme de ti, voy a cultivar la tierra. En ella para encontrar remedio para mi pena. Aquí plantaré un rosal de la cepina más gruesa. Tendré la corona para cuando en mí te muera. Para mi esa violeta azul, clavelina roja para mi pasión. Y para saber si me corresponde desojo un blanco más adiós. Si me quiere mucho, poquito